We are up and streaming on YouTube. So
Yeah, I see it in the corner there.
oh, does it show on yours too?
Yeah, it
Okay.
says live on YouTube in the corner.
Okay.
I'm on my iPad, so I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but
No, I think I just got off the phone with Seth because we wanted to double check to make sure it was actually up and running on YouTube, and it looks like it is. So
Where's our hot dog pan at?
I'm not sure where it is.
hi, Jeremy.
Hey guys. I'll probably just join with without video,
Okay.
so you can't see me doing shots.
We are live on YouTube right now too. So
Okay.
fair enough. Thanks for the warning.
Yep, you got it.
why am I not fair? What?
Hmm?
I'm sure. We got 3 minutes.
Hey, Will, did you get that email from, were you on that one from USD that went out about 5 o'clock today? Did you get an email from them about like stuff for the dome, or was that just sent to me? I was just curious if Christy would have got it too.
I did not get it.
Okay. I didn't know if they sent it to all admin or just superintendents.
I did not get anything.
Okay.
Not cool enough.
Well, it's just kind of a reminder about all their department, or excuse me, the Board of Regents, all their kind of reminders for having to wear masks, and they're only going to sell prepackaged stuff at the concession stands.
Wow.
And
Gotcha.
they have
No,
like,
I
I think they have signs set up for like flow. So like when people are coming in and out, like need to go this way or that way. And kind of sounds like a big mess.
yeah.
Hey,
That's for
Kevin, I
sure.
do have a question about that.
Yes.
Are masks required the entire time while in the dome or just when entering?
So the email that I just got from the office of the USD president said one of their bulleted points was face coverings are required at all times.
Okay.
And then it goes down further when it talks about their food service provider and only prepackaged items, bottled drinks. It just says in that area, as a reminder, face coverings are required when not actively eating or drinking.
Okay. That's
So,
helpful. Yeah. The media information I got stated clearly that the face coverings were required upon entering the dome, but,
right.
but that it didn't say anything beyond that. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I can actually forward you that email if you want.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see, do we have everybody? Corey, Kyle, Cody, Mark, and Slade. Shane's here, Will's here, Jeremy's here, and Debbie's here. All right, I think we're ready to roll.
All right. Well, so Basically, we just need to take roll call and then we're right in there, right?
Yeah, I can, actually, I can share my screen real quick. And that's the agenda right there. I mean, there's
Deb,
not,
do you want to take roll call then?
Slade,
Yes.
Cody,
Yep.
Corey,
Present.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yep. Okay, then we need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Was that motion by Corey?
Yes.
I'll second it. Second by Cody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, then we're gonna have a discussion regarding school exclusion for students that are designated for close contact.
all right, I'm going to get out of that. All right, I'll kind of run through a couple things here and what kind of prompted this. I know we had this on the agenda on Monday night. You know, we talked about a few different things and ultimately ended up moving on. Yesterday afternoon, I know I talked with Kyle probably on about 3 separate occasions about a couple things, and that was kind of prompted by having to send another one of our elementary classes home for 2 weeks because of exposure in that room. And that kind of just prompted some questions, I guess, with me, and that I kind of talked through with Kyle about, you know, what we're able to do instructionally at that level, what that's going to look like over the course of the next 2 weeks. And basically over the last, I don't know, 24 hours, kind of had, I know, my head spinning quite a bit about some of this stuff and just trying to figure out, particularly with the elementary, but maybe all the way across the board, you know, if we throw out everything else, so we're not worried about sports, we're not worried about people being upset with what we're doing, we're not worried about the factors that we actually can't control, as far as some kind of unintended consequences outside of the school, based on some of the exclusion that we've been doing. If we get it to a situation where we're just talking about the academic side of things, the quality of instruction that we're able to provide when kids are out of the building, compared to the other side of the argument, which is what we're trying to do for the safety and well-being of students, staff, families, community members, so on and so forth. So when we really kind of got into this today, and we had a lot of discussions inside the school building about it today, kind of looked at it from 2 perspectives. Is there anything that we can do to tweak what we're currently doing from an instructional standpoint to try to eliminate some of those gaps between in-person learning and remote learning, to try to get that as close to possible, you know, as we can, close to the same as possible as we can. And we talked on Monday about how, in all honesty, 5 through 12, I don't know that the gap between what we do in person and what we do remotely is real big. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but it's pretty close, particularly at the high school level. You know, so you start looking at the 2 different sides of that. Okay, if we can close that gap and we can tweak some things instructionally, then maybe we don't have to do anything different than what we're doing. But if we can't, and I think the lower we go, the harder it is to close that gap, then I think we need to start looking, taking a real long, hard look and having a serious conversation about doing something differently as far as the exclusion side of things go. So I know that was a lot there, but that kind of is a pretty rough summary of some of the conversations I've had with you guys over the course of the last 24 hours. Now, one thing I did want to highlight here quick before we get into some of this stuff, and I know we've had some conversations about some different things that we could do. I'm going to share my screen again here real quick. One thing, we talked about this, or we touched on it at a board meeting back in September, this was some guidance that we got from Associated School Boards and from the Council of School Attorneys when we initially made a motion back then as far as what we were going to do. And if we go down to the bottom here, I have two highlighted spots. If we go down to the bottom here, basically we were told or recommended, we follow the Department of Health guidance and the recommendations for the temporary exclusion, or we do something different and we just have to set forth, what our justification is for why we're going to do that. At the end of the day, in September, we just decided that we wanted to follow the Department of Health stuff, and that's kind of where we left it. There is some stuff up here further, prior to this where it talks a little bit about liability and so on and so forth. In the event that somebody was actually really going to sue, they would probably make the argument that if you're not following the DOH and CDC stuff, what are you doing? So that's just kind of where this started, and we decided that's the route we were going to go. Now, every school in the state got that. Every school board in the state got that. Obviously, other schools have decided they want to do something different, and a lot of them have come up with some justification as to why they want to do that. The question I think that I've gotten from some people, and I know that you've all kind of talked with different people about some of this as well, is, if we've been doing what the Department of Health and the CDC have said for, the first however many months of the year since September, why would we do something different? And I think that's what I kind of tried to explain at the beginning is we're starting to look at some of the instructional implications and whether there's a big enough discrepancy there to think about doing something different. Obviously we've seen more cases. We obviously know that there's a virus, the virus is in our building. I think we've had 3 staff members now test positive in the last week. So obviously there's a little bit of an issue. So can we weigh that versus, some of this other stuff? Now, one of the popular things that other schools have been doing if they're not following Department of Health is adjusting their quarantine period, maybe not having it be 14 days, but something shorter, or maybe potentially using masks as a way to, facilitate a shorter quarantine period. The first question I asked myself with that was if people are doing, say, for example, a 7-day quarantine period instead of a 14-day period, where are they getting that information from? I know Mark sent me an email the other night with something from Northwestern College in Orange City, and there were some links to some research articles in that email that I looked through, and I looked through a couple other things, and I'm just going to, some of them are kind of hard to follow because they're really like statistical analysis stuff. So they throw around a lot of big words, a lot of medical terminology. There was one of them that was actually really good. And I'm going to share here again, and I'm going to pull that up. It came from a Harvard medical study here. And basically, as far as some of the questions and the justification, I'm going to go down here a little bit. There's a question here that specifically addresses right here. How long is it between when a person is exposed to the virus and when they start showing symptoms? All right, so basically, just to kind of summarize here, the research that they've looked at is said that from the time somebody is potentially exposed to the time they show symptoms is 5 to 6 days. There's multiple studies that I've looked at that have, basically agreed on that number. So I think when other schools are making a decision to change, that's where that number is coming from. Now, some things to keep in mind with that is, that's just kind of the running average of what they're seeing. Some people show symptoms sooner. There's some people that show symptoms later. Likewise, there's the whole argument there as far as, if somebody doesn't show symptoms but still has it, can they still spread it? So there are some other factors that play into some of that stuff, but that's why when people bring these kids back early, they're basically requiring them to wear masks for the last 7 days of whatever that quarantine period might happen to be. Some other things I think to consider if we're thinking about changing is, for example, virus particles can be in the air for up to 3 hours. That plays a little bit of a part in terms of some of this stuff. And when we're talking about close contacts, this article did a really good job of highlighting the changes in the close contact definition. Again, basically highlighting yes, we try to follow the 6 feet, 15-minute rule, but it's always helpful to remember that there's other factors that can contribute to whether somebody gets infected or not. So that's kind of where I'm at. I will stop talking for the sake of everyone else's sanity right now. But those are just some things to consider. I know everybody's had a lot of conversations with people over the course of the past week, the past couple days. I just think when it's all said and done, if we look at it from an instructional standpoint only, there's the potential for maybe thinking about doing something differently. So with that, I am going to back up for a minute, and if anybody else has some comments they want to make, I do have a couple examples from some other schools that I had previously shared with you that we could take a look at if you're interested in doing that. They kind of, fall in line with some of that 7-day stuff that we've had some conversations about in the past. So, but anyway, I'm done talking for a minute, so feel free to jump in wherever you want.
The first question my first thing, and this is probably what I've thought about the most, I think, on this, is if we were to change from the 14-day, which what is fine, and we go to a 7-day, and like, I realize it's probably all, it's hard, but have you, like, what are ways of like, because if it gets, no, and maybe I should ask the question, if I am under the understanding if you get reported as a close contact, it's a 14-day quarantine, correct? When the state calls you?
Yes.
Now, that is overruled by our rules, or that is not overruled by our rules?
So that's a good question. I actually had a conversation with another superintendent the other day. I made a couple calls to kind of some schools that I hadn't previously talked to, just to see what they were doing, if they were doing something different than the Department of Health recommendations. And basically what they said was, this is what our rule is. We're not following Department of Health. This is what we agreed upon. Now, I, as a superintendent, still report close contacts to the Department of Health. So those people are actually contacted by the Department of Health, after however many days, to be told that they're a close contact and all that stuff. But the school is then making a decision to say that even though the Department of Health would consider you to be a close contact, we are still going to allow you to come to school inside of that 14-day window if you do X, Y, and Z. So
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I just got a text message. It sounds like the YouTube link isn't working.
I would have to check with, we had it working earlier. It was up and running. Are they trying to?
They just said they tried to get on the link and it's not working on YouTube. And so I figured I'd ask. Sorry, not to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'll see what Seth has to say about that. So anyway, so he said he's watching on his iPhone and it works fine, but he can't get his Android or computer to work.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll tell them to try their iPhone.
I'll see if we can get that figured out. I don't know. We're trying something a little different here. There's some settings inside of Zoom that let you just stream directly to YouTube, and we had it working before, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting some text too from some people saying it's working for some, but not working for others. Well, worst case scenario, I think for sure we can get a recording of it up later for those that didn't have a chance to watch it. So at least that's what Seth was telling me. So I apologize for that. Anyway, so where were we? So you were asking about the Department of Health close contact thing. So my understanding is, when we're reporting this stuff to the Department of Health in the first place, we're kind of, like I mentioned on Monday, we're basically kind of doing their job for them. I know there's some schools that have just said altogether, I'm not interested in doing that. I don't even send that information to the Department of Health anymore. We do all of our notifications and they follow our rules and we don't worry about it. And like I said, then on the other hand, there's some people that still report it to the Department of Health. People would still get a call from them telling them they, should quarantine, but we're still allowing those kids to come to school based on our own local rules. So,
Okay. So technically that would supersede.
right. Yeah. As far as that stuff goes.
But the student's family could say, well, I'd rather have my kids quarantined, and they're just going to have to, do their stuff online, and it's just going to be the way it is. Right.
So some of the school or, some schools that are in this scenario that have been using, you're going to quarantine for 7 days. They tell them initially, so you basically have two options. If you feel more comfortable quarantining your child for 14 days or keeping them out of school, I guess I should say, for 14 days, you certainly can. We have stuff set up for that to work. If after 7 days, your child isn't showing any symptoms and you would like for them to come back to school, we're okay with that, but you have to follow this, that, and, something else. And most of what we're seeing is, you're going to have to wear a mask at all times. We're going to screen you a couple additional times a day. And we're going to tell you that if at all possible, you try to stay 6 feet away from other people when it is possible. That's kind of what the majority of them are doing on that end.
So I'm going to ask the question, if we were to go to something like that, lunch is going to probably be one of the worst times as far as kids not having a mask on. Do we have a room that is capable for these kids to separate themselves from the rest of the kids to have lunch, I guess is, what I mean? Because at that point, nobody in the lunchroom has a mask on.
Correct.
Because everybody is eating.
Well, there's probably
the one article you did pull up earlier, I don't remember which one that you pulled up, but I was reading on the bottom that it says you should have a quarantine room on it.
So, well, that was one of the questions that came up from one of the other schools involved, or at I think it was one of those Zoom meetings we had with the Department of Health and the Department of Ed. Somebody asked about, could you have a separate quarantine room in the building? And they kind of said you could, but that creates some other issues. And that was more so for people doing it for the entire school day. Like, we're going to let you come back to school, but we're going to take all those kids and put them in a room by themselves for the entire day. I think what you're asking, there's probably a couple different ways you could do that. One would be, we've talked a little bit about kind of maybe changing how we handle lunch anyway and staggering it a little bit differently. But it's not out of the question to say that if you have somebody that's been out for 7 days, at least I'm thinking middle school, high school, and Shane might have to think about something different at the elementary, but middle school, high school, they're out for 7 days. If they come back, maybe we just have them eat at a separate table than some of the other kids, or find a way to limit the amount of traffic in there so you could put them, whether it's on the other side of the room or whatever it might happen to be. There's other rooms that might be an option. We'd probably have to think about that a little bit. So if that kind of answers your question a little bit.
Yeah.
So what kind of stipulations are we going to run on this deal if we allow these kids to come back after 7 days? are we going to have required masks during the whole time if they're considered a close contact at one time?
So there's a couple different things. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna pull up. I sent you this in an email. A while back, and this was kind of when I was just getting some different information. I attached the Viborg Hurley one, but the Avon policy. Can everybody see this? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, they made this motion. They're going to use social distancing masks, dividers if they have them, to determine the length. So if you get down here, what they do up front, and there's other schools that are just saying, we don't care what happened up front. You're going to quarantine for 7 days no matter what. And then you're going to come back and you're going to have stipulations in place. This one, what they did in Avon was they did consider situations where the people in question were both wearing masks. And they took that into consideration. If they were both wearing masks, I believe they basically said here that as long as they don't have symptoms, those kids could come back right away. And then what they do is they go down and they say, if they were not wearing, if one of them was not wearing masks and the other one was, everybody's going to quarantine for 7 days. And then after 7 days, when they come back, they'll be eligible to come back. And then in here, it kind of talks about, so after the 7th day of quarantine, the student may return to school under the following conditions. The student will be required to wear a mask. The student will be subject to temperature checks twice a day and before any extracurricular activity, and the student has to be symptom-free. These conditions will remain for the student through the 14th day. And then they just go on to say that if you're a household close contact, meaning somebody in your house tests positive, they're just doing all that through the Department of Health. So that person would still have to abide by a 14-day quarantine period. There's other schools that use different variations of that. Like I said, this is just an example of what they've been doing up front as far as trying to put some teeth to the mask wearing thing. Pretty much everything I've seen as far as if you're going to do something less than 14 days of a quarantine period, if you're bringing them back early, the mask wearing thing is not negotiable. You have to do it all the time. And that falls in line with, and I'm sure this is a question that some of you have been getting also. We made a motion to declare all employees as essential workers and bring some of them back even if they've been exposed. That's essentially what an essential worker has to do is they have to mask all the time. They have to screen, self-screen multiple times a day and have to try to keep that 6-foot cushion as much as their job allows them to do. So that's kind of taking a combination of, what that essential worker thing is and applying it to the students after a certain setup, time frame to try to make that work.
So I guess my concern is we had loads of parents that were just livid about their kids wearing a mask in the hallway during when we went to Yellow that one time. And now what happens if we have a family or 2 families or 3 families that I'm going to send my kid and they don't have to wear one?
They have to go home. I mean, that's the only way that you can make that work. I mean, either, you decide that, okay, we're going to try to meet you in the middle here and we're going to create a scenario where you can come back to the building, but we're asking you to do this, that, and something else to try to keep everybody else safe. Because there is a potential that, even if you don't have symptoms and you're feeling okay, that you still have it. It can be as simple as, we're going to remind you once, and then after that, we're set up to handle this stuff outside of school. I just don't know that there's any other line you can take on that, to be honest with you. And I know that maybe isn't the most popular thing ever, but if you're going to make it work and that's what you decide, I think that's what you're going to have to do.
And
Even
I
if we-
agree with,
even if-
and I agree with that. I mean, but I'm just saying, I know
No,
there's some
I
parents-
understand. There's the potential there for that to be a little bit of an issue.
And I know
Well-
there are parents chewing on my ears about kids wearing masks in the hallways. And oh my God, this is the most terrible thing on earth. And if we go ahead and do a meet in the middle thing, they better be ready to send their kids to school with a mask on their dang face.
I agree, but I think two things on that. One is the first time we tried to enforce the mask, it was still in green. And have you had any complaints since we've gone to yellow, actually, Kevin?
I don't know that I've had, if I think about it, I haven't had any complaints from parents. However, we have had, so basically our rule that we were trying to do is, again, meet in the middle. We understand that the first time around, the whole mask thing didn't go over very well. I don't know at this point in time that even with everything that's going on, if you told a kid you have to wear one in any situation, unless you're able to keep 6 feet of distance, I think we would still have trouble. We had trouble when we were just trying to go with the stand up, mask up thing. You're up and moving, put on a mask. I would say initially we probably had, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Will, on the high school side of the building anyway, we probably had about 90% of the kids that were doing a pretty good job with it. But the issue was the other 10%, if we didn't stay on them constantly about putting them on over the course of a 2 to 3 day period, your 90% turned into less than 50% in a hurry. So, I mean, that's the tough part with it. You got to stay on it, and you got to be really, not that you're trying to be demeaning or you're not yelling at people. I mean, most of the time I know Mr. Massey and it was just a simple, hey, can you put your mask on? And most kids did. I mean, but at some point in time, you also can't be reminding somebody 15 times a day to put it on. They got to be able to, I mean, at that point in time, it's kind of irrelevant then.
But also, even if we went to something like this, if somebody chose not to want to wear a mask, they could still stay home for the whole 14 days.
Correct.
I mean, right. So, I mean,
Yep.
it's not like we're saying you've had, it's just required if you want to come back and get in-school instruction in that assuming we go with the 7 day, in that 7 day period.
Correct.
Right.
I'm just worried about the ones who say, well, I'm just going to wear one here and wear one there. And well, if I get caught by Mr. Coons or Mr. Massey or Mr. Voss, well, I guess I'll just put it on then, and that's it.
I would also say it's a one time, you probably, and maybe it's not a one time, but if Kevin said, or somebody says, put it on, no, well, then go home. And if the whole board is willing to agree on something, like, then they can be mad, but that's just the rule. You know what I mean? Then everybody's behind. That's how we're getting you back into school. Right.
Well, and I think what Corey, and correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, what you're kind of leaning at too is if a kid sees me or Mr. Voss, they're probably going to be inclined to have it on. It's what are they doing when they're in somebody else's classroom and they don't have somebody that's able to kind of sit there and watch them the entire time. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, I mean, because I hear about it in from my kid that, well, I'm not going to wear it unless I know I'm going to see him. So I'm just going to hold on to it until I'm going to go around the corner. Yeah, look, well, here they are, and I put it on, and then I go. There's going to have to be some parental guidance and tell these kids that, your classroom has had this. You need to just go ahead and do it for the next 7 days if you want to be in school during this time. I mean, if you don't want to be in school, it is what it is.
I would agree with that 100%, Corey. All the parents that are watching, they have to help us out too, as far as educating their kids, and that they need to wear the mask like they're supposed to. And
I mean, from what I heard from some of these parents is, this is not a big deal. The kids they're immune to it, or they're just going to have slight symptoms. I really don't, that's fine if you think that way, but you're going to pass this on to the teachers and whoever else is in this school. It's just not right. I mean, you have to teach these kids. You have to have some responsibility that you need to wear it. I mean, I've had, like I said the other night, I've had my in-laws both had it. My brother had it. And they showed slight symptoms. My cousins had it and they had terrible symptoms. And they said it was ugly. We need to have some parental guidance. And I hope I'm trying to drive the point home to the parents is that it's real. I don't care what you think. And that if you want your kids to come to school, then you better be willing to have these kids put a mask on for 7 days. I am demanding this because this is a real deal, people. I'll step off my soapbox now.
So do you have one that you prefer that you would want to try and follow, Kevin? Like, is the Avon one the one you'd want to follow, or?
Well, I mean, I think there's bits and pieces of that one that are okay. Like I said, essentially after the 7 days, you're treating a kid the same way you would treat an essential worker. So I think that's probably what most schools are using as their rationale. If I can do this for a teacher immediately, if they've been exposed and are not showing symptoms, it makes sense that we would try it with a kid. I think the question is on the front side of it, do you want to have anything in there that potentially takes your quarantine period down to 0 if you have the mask on mask thing going on? I mean, so let's go this way first. Like we talked about, the 14-day thing is probably your safest bet, if you really want to do that. But again, we're trying to weigh the well-being and the health benefits versus what we're losing instructionally, particularly at the low elementary end. And that's no fault of the teacher either. That's just because of the age group involved and the difficulty, involved in trying to get some type of technology in there. I mean, there's a little bit that can be done, but at the end of the day, my struggle, my struggle with that is, we just can't do a ton. And what happens if we stick with the 14-day thing? They're out, they come back, somebody else is exposed, or somebody else gets it, exposes the class, and we have to send them home again. Now we look at taking an elementary class that we have trouble connecting with virtually, and they've been out of school for an entire month. You can't tell me that that's going to not impact them, somewhere down the road. And you take that and put it together with what we already lost last spring. And I'll tell you, what we're doing right now is 1,000 times better than what we had going on last spring across the board. But I mean, you put that together, and I have some real concerns about what's going to happen with those kids and what they're missing out on and them falling behind. So, I think that has to be considered. And again, I don't want to do anything. I've had people that have contacted me over the course of the last 2 weeks and have said, we really appreciate what you're doing. You're looking out for kids. We appreciate that you're not just worried about yourself, you're worried about other people. That means a lot too. And, that's one of the things that makes me hesitant on, just jumping right into something else, is that you look at your vulnerable populations, the people, whether it's your staff members or kids that have underlying conditions. I don't want us to do something that is going to make them feel uncomfortable and not want to come to school, because, they shouldn't have to make a decision to stay home strictly because they're afraid to come to school. I mean, there's some kids I know right now that are staying at home and they're doing it because they're uncomfortable coming. But, I would venture to guess that there's some of those kids that would really benefit from being in school, and that's not really an option for them right now because of, everything that's going on. So it's a tough argument to make one way or the other. So just to understand, and I understand that whatever we decide to do collectively, it's going to impact people in a different way. And, there's people right now that are upset because their kid has to be out for 14 days. I understand that. I understand everything that goes along with it. But at the same time, if we go away from that, there's going to be people that feel, that are going to be upset because they feel like the safety of their child is being sacrificed because, of maybe other factors that shouldn't be considered when it comes to, health and well-being. So, with that said, I just think, like I told you guys when we kind of decided we were going to have the meeting last night, whatever we decide to do, I think everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to be in favor of what we're doing and really has to believe that what we're doing is the right thing to do. So that way, moving forward, whatever we're enforcing, whatever we're getting questioned about, we support everybody that's involved. The 5 board members support all 5 of the board members. The administration supports the administration, and the board supports the administration. The administration supports the board. If we can do that, I think it's going to be a lot easier to move forward on something one way or the other. But, can we get to the point? That's the tough part about committees and boards and having multiple people involved is, can we get to a point where everybody can agree that what we're doing is not only the right thing to do, but it's actually in the best interest of the most people?
Well, everything we're supposed to be agreeing upon is for the well-being of our students and the teachers that are teaching them. Plain and simple. So if we're taking care of the kids and the teachers, that's what we need to do. I mean, that's plain and simple. And if we move forward with this and it's guarding them all in helping these kids gain a better education because they can be in class or choose to remote learn, which is fine. My daughter's goes to Lake Area Tech. Half of her classes are remote because of this COVID stuff. So she's taking lots of computer classes, classes on her computer that, normally would be taught online. Is she happy about it? Not totally. But that's the way it is. And it's going to continue with this until we get this whole COVID thing knocked out. So like you said, Kevin, it's going to have to be agreed upon, everybody on this board and all the committees and in the community, that we will support this decision that we have on our hands right now. So yeah, I mean, I would be in total support of what you're doing here. And if the kids so choose to do remote learning, that's fine.
Kevin, I like that you brought up this Avon one. When I looked back, this was the one that kind of stood out the most to me. I thought you take that 7-day at home and 7-day with a mask, so you keep the kids kind of in the ball game, but yet they're willing to mask up that second half. And then that second part you talked about, where in the case where both the contact and the positive contact both had masks on, I think that's taken directly from Sioux Falls. They both have that too. And I thought that was an interesting way to do it, that if kids choose to have the masks, it's almost encouraging them. That way, I think that we're putting a little peer pressure the other way. The thing I like too is I think probably does a good job of letting people have a choice, getting a mask up or not. And then I don't know. I think this is just probably the best thing I've seen so far. So I'm glad you brought this one up. Maybe you've got something else for us though.
I mean, honestly, they're all kind of a variation of one another. I mean, there's maybe a couple of tweaks here and there. But for the most part, that's what I've seen, and that's the conversations that I've had with people, is if they have gone away from the Department of Health stuff, they're doing it because their concern is they have a lot of what they would consider healthy kids that are having to stay out of the building. And they're trying to get some teeth to the mask wearing, and also not, have kids miss out on as much without being in the building.
Well, the thing I wonder too, if we give kids the choice to wear the masks, like in the situation right now, if we're in code yellow, where they need to mask up when they go in the hallways or whenever they stand up. If they have their masks on and they're moving around and they're closer than 6 feet, we should be able to track a lot easier, because we're pretty much, if they're seated with their masks off, they should be 6 feet, I'm hoping. But if they stand up and they're moving around and they are crossing and so forth, and both are masked up, then they shouldn't be considered close contacts, and it should be very easy to trace.
Yeah, I mean, you would, at the very least, you'd eliminate having to determine contacts in high traffic areas or, hallways and things like that, because if everybody had one on in those areas, which is kind of what we have been doing, you could remove them from the equation. So when you get into the classroom, you'd be looking more at, seating charts and different things of that nature to try to figure out who's, immediately around somebody that ends up testing positive. Obviously, the added bonus would be if a kid gets into a classroom and they choose to continue wearing their mask even when they're seated, you would now be removing more people from that equation if multiple people are doing that.
Do most teachers have a seating chart, Kevin, for their rooms, or?
They do. I know one of the things we've talked about a little bit is, is there a way, particularly with like your middle school classes, and maybe even your freshmen and sophomore, who even on that end of the building, when they're changing classes, they still have the majority of those classes with their entire class. Would doing some type of universal seating chart where every teacher has the same seating chart in their room make sense? In theory, it probably does. I did have Mr. Faulkner and I were actually talking about that today, and he brought up, well, the only bad thing about that is, would your people that are always in the front of the room be the ones that are the most exposed in the event that a teacher actually ends up getting sick again, in that scenario? So, in theory, yes, I think if you did something like that, at the very least, teachers having seating charts help somewhat, because you can help track some of that stuff better. Like I said, obviously, if you can get kids to buy into the whole masking thing beyond the whole stand-up mask up thing, it eliminates issues as well.
And I know the kids are going to hate having to have seating charts, but it makes it much easier for you guys as administration to figure out close contacts and that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, we had sitting charts back in the old days at SDSU. So, it's one of those things. You have your seat, you're going to sit in it, and that's the way it is.
Slade, you seem pretty quiet over there.
I'm basically just in favor of following the Avon outline. I think it's making the best out of a bad situation. I think it's a good balance of safety and also getting the kids back in school as much as possible. I really don't see any alternate methods that are going to have that balance. sticking with the 14-day thing, the way things are going, we're just not going to have a lot of class time for the kids, and especially in elementary. The online learning just doesn't work that great. And the more we can keep these kids in the building and at the same time keep them safe, I think is the best route to go. And I think that Avon outline pretty much seals the deal with that. So, yeah, I mean, everything that's been said basically falls back on that for me. I'd like us to go ahead with the Avon outline, and hopefully that's the way we go.
Anything else on that, or do you think are we at a consensus? I mean, we have to vote one way or the other, but is there anybody that's not on board with that, not in favor of that for one reason or another? Do you want me to pull it up again just so everybody can see it again?
Why don't you let us read through it one more time, please?
Okay, will do. Let's see. Okay. All right. So the first part's just kind of, window dressing as far as, how we're going to determine the contacts and all that fun stuff.
Kevin, if you can slide that to the left at all, our little pictures are kind of blocking the right side of the text.
I think, Mark, if you just click on your minimize tab, the single button, you'll get rid of that and you should be able to read it all.
Okay.
So, basically we start off and we're talking about, with both the COVID positive and the close contact were masked. The close contact can remain in school under these conditions, and essentially what they are is they're the same guidelines an essential worker would use. So they're going to wear a mask in the building at all times and during all activities they're involved in. They're going to have their temperature taken 2 times a day, which I think, and before the extracurricular stuff, I think it's easy enough. At the very least, we already screen in the morning. I think it's easy enough to probably screen at lunch, run them through that again. And then obviously at the end of the day, if they're in an extracurricular activity, we have been doing that anyway. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of extra work there involved. Again, the whole key is they have to remain symptom-free. We're really going to have to rely on kids to be honest and upfront. And this has kind of been the story all the way along with anybody when we've been trying to tell kids if they don't feel good to stay home. But particularly in this situation, if we know they've been exposed or potentially exposed, they have symptoms, we're going to need to make sure that we get them out of the building. And then again, kind of that third element, they're going to socially distance themselves from others during class, when and where possible, and also during lunch. And we'll have to figure out exactly how we want to handle that lunch side of things. So then basically all other situations, if only one person was masked, that's where we're going to bring in the 7 days instead of doing 14. Again, the key is they can't have symptoms after the 7th day. And if they're symptom free, we're going to run them through the same stuff that we just talked about for those that were double masked to begin with. And some of the stuff in here we'll have to change up just a bit because, they have the option to keep them at home for 14 days. They say like Google Classroom and stuff. We would probably just change that to say whatever our remote learning method would happen to be. This one here, and I think this is kind of what everybody's been doing on that end too. If somebody's exposed out of the building, we just go based on what the Department of Health tells us. If you are actually a household contact student, so mom, dad has it or something like that, we would still stick to the 14-day exclusion period. And part of the reason for that is, I know when I've talked to other schools for the household thing, sticking with that is just, we can control a little bit more inside the building and kind of know what the circumstances involved in some of this stuff is. outside of the building, we don't. So we have to rely on the Department of Health to kind of determine that for us. So, but it's pretty straightforward once you kind of get into it a little bit. So questions on any of that? Any further clarification? All right, if not, I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to this. So if everybody's okay with that, essentially, then we would just pass a resolution that would pretty much state all of that. So essentially, it's what I just ran through right there. Like I said, with the exception of, we would just, that one part where people have the option to stay home for the whole 14 days, that would just say, instead of Google Classroom or Zoom or whatever, just would be reflect whatever our method of virtual instruction would be. So they always have that option no matter what, to do the full 14 if that's the way that they want to go.
So everybody's in agreement, then that's something they can live with or get behind or whatever then?
Looks
Yeah.
good.
Will, you're okay with that too, Shane?
No, I think about it from a teacher standpoint, like Kuhn said, the teachers missing out on, or the students missing out on instruction, but I only teach 3 classes. And this is the hardest I've worked to teach those 3 classes in all my time. And I usually taught 6 to 7 classes. Just of all the online stuff is so much work that, you know, getting the kids back in school, it's so much easier having the kids in your room, teaching them than doing the virtual stuff. So if we can get them back into school and do measures to keep things safe, I'm all for it.
Okay, so then we basically just need a motion to adopt that policy with the few minor changes that Kevin explained. Right?
Yep, I think from my end, that's what it would be.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
So I got a motion by Mark. Do we have a
I'll second it, Slade.
Second by Slade.
We
Any
should-
other?
I was just gonna say, we should probably have, we can still, if anybody has to discuss, but have Debbie call a roll on that one.
Anybody have any other discussion? Okay, Deb, you want to take a roll call vote then?
Slade,
Yes.
Cody,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes. So motion carries 5-0. We have nothing else then, right? We're good to adjourn?
Yep, that is correct.
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I
So
will
moved,
motion
Slade.
to adjourn the
You
meeting.
guys all can't yell at once. I can only write down one name.
I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, a motion by Corey,
I'll second that.
second by Cody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed,
I said
same
yes.
sign. Opposed, same sign. All right. Everybody have a great evening.
You
Yeah,
too.
thanks, guys.